Over the last decade, as the United States fought for the hearts and minds of Muslims around the world, one of the biggest setbacks came from what happened at Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. Diplomats and policy experts say the images of torture and humiliation turned millions of people against us. In our #1 story on the countdown, the Washington Post is now reporting charges that American allies in Afghanistan also tortured some prisoners who were first captured by Americans. The Post reported the suspects were housed in a building across the street from the U.S. military headquarters in Kabul. Despite multiple warnings about the alleged torture, the United States continued to transfer detainees to Afghan intelligence. The allegations were made by the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross. The U.S. is not accused of the torture. The article cited the National Directorate of Security. The primary intelligence service of Afghanistan is doing the dirty work. Still, that Afghan intelligence service is one the United States has been working with. The United Nations recounted detainees' stories of interrogators hanging them by their hands for hours, beating them with metal pipes, shocking them with electricity, and twisting their genitals until they passed out. The Post also quoted a flat denial from the deputy director of the Afghan agency, who called his department a rising star for our country. The National Directorate of Security Deputy Director Operations Ahmed Zia described the UN report as an inaccurate attack on the agency and said insurgents are trained in Pakistan to lie to human rights groups. According to the Post report, coalition troops stopped transferring Taliban and al-Qaeda suspects to this and other facilities after the UN brought allegations of widespread abuse to General John Allen, the top U.S. military commander there, on August the 30th. The man ranking just below him told the Post, "I'm confident we are taking the appropriate steps now. I don't see it as a systemic problem, as some have said it might be." Let's bring in Matthew Alexander, a former senior military interrogator and author of Kill or Capture: How a Special Operations Task Force Took Down a Notorious al-Qaeda Terrorist. Good evening, Matt. We appreciate you coming on.
Great to be here, David.
Given what you know about interrogation practices, do you believe the Afghan interrogators were torturing prisoners, that we brought them?
I do believe that they were torturing prisoners. You know, I've had reports from friends who have served recently in Afghanistan who have said as much, that we know these practices have been occurring in Afghan prisons. And I don't think it should come as a surprise to us. I mean, we're the ones who essentially set the bar in Afghanistan for torture and abuse of prisoners, just like we did in Iraq. In Iraq, where we tortured and abused numerous prisoners, not just at Abu Ghraib, we later saw that the Ministry of Interior was torturing prisoners in the same way, emulating the same methods that we used, the enhanced interrogation techniques, as well as others. So this shouldn't come as a surprise to us.
It seems as if there were plenty of hints even before the UN issued its report, whether it's through various channels or folks like the ones you're hearing from. Did the Americans say the right things while turning a willful blind eye to what was really going on?
Well, I think this has been the repeated pattern that we've had with torture and abuse when it's committed by our allies. As we say, we didn't know about it. But at the same time, you know, I think we also have an obligation to be aggressive about searching out and seeing if these types of practices are taking place. You know, Rumsfeld issued an order well back when we were still in the heat of the fight in Iraq, Frago 242, which said that we wouldn't aggressively pursue or look into allegations of abuse by our allies in Iraq. And that set a precedent, I think, to the military personnel that we would turn a blind eye to such types of activity.
And it sounds like that precedent remains, even though we have a change of administration, the Obama administration. It sounds like there has not been an affirmative effort to reverse what President Bush's defense secretary essentially put in motion.
Yeah, David, I mean, the bottom line is when we have impunity for torture in our own country, how can we go to other countries and tell them that they can't torture people? They'll look at us as if we're just hypocrites. You know, as recently as 2 months ago, former Vice President Dick Cheney was on TV boasting about waterboarding prisoners and saying that he'd do it again. We have every candidate on the Republican side in the presidential race, with the exception of Ron Paul, saying that they would bring back enhanced interrogation techniques. In our own country, we've had this culture of impunity for torture, and that has set an example for our allies that we don't take this issue seriously.
Never mind a lot of the Republicans. A lot of people who watch a fictional television might think that torture is an efficient way to extract information. Is it ever?
No, we can definitively say that torture never works when we consider the long-term ramifications of torture. Number one being that it helps our enemy to recruit new fighters who will carry out many more attacks than we'd ever stop by using torture, assuming that it was effective. But professional interrogators have said time and time again that we don't even need to use torture, that we can get our enemies to cooperate with us without it. And we've been doing that since at least as far back as World War II.
Is it possible that the prisoners were exaggerating or even fabricating their claims to the Red Cross and to the United Nations?
Well, I know some of these investigators. I've met them and I've talked to them. And, you know, I was an interrogator, an interviewer, a criminal investigator. And I've been impressed with the types of methods that they use for interviewing people to weed out the ones that are lying. They have methods that they use to ensure that those people who do make up false claims can be separated from those who are legitimately reporting torture and abuse. And so I do believe these claims. I do think they're doing a good job of vetting the sources. And the consistency within the different types of abuses that the prisoners are reporting points to the fact that they probably are valid.
Matthew Alexander, former senior military interrogator and author of Killer Capture. Matthew, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.